How we doing, everybody? It's your guy Wardy here. It's May 5th, 2025, and I'm recording this video late night the night prior after I spent my entire Sunday getting ready just to watch the Mets lose back-to-back games by one run. Yes, I'm still frustrated by it, but like everything else in life, we have to move forward. The Mets have a 3-game set beginning tonight at the time of recording this video against the Arizona DBacks, so we're going to preview that a little bit later in this one as part of our latest Big Mets update segment, because we first have to get into what is happening with the Mets and their roster configuration, as Jesse Winker is likely headed to the injured list with an oblique injury, and we'll get into what extent is that injury, how did he sustain it, and ultimately, who are the Mets going to call up here for this Arizona Diamondbacks series in his place? And there are two guys that stick out like a sore thumb right now, that being in John Singelton and Jared Young. We'll get into them along with other player options, including guys like Drew Gilbert, among others, here shortly, everybody. We're also going to take a complete deep dive there in the farm to see how everyone's faring from Port St. Lucie all the way up to AAA Syracuse, along with how the Mets can potentially not only win this upcoming series against the Diamondbacks, but the true keys to success that have faltered them in previous matchups is what we're about to get into. So thank you guys kindly for smashing like and subscribe on as you first chime in. It's greatly appreciated. And please let us know all your initial reactions in the comments down below. And also make sure, folks, that you are checking out all the great work that we're doing, not only here on YouTube, but as well as what we do in the Bleacher Report app, as I'm a host Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern for MLB Topics, recurring contributor there with the New York Post Sports YouTube channel, among many other things. And I also want to give a quick shout out here, everybody, to today's video sponsor at SeatGeek, because not only does SeatGeek have you covered all your ticketing needs, but they currently have over 70,000 active events to choose from, and with over 2+ million total downloads and tickets, guys, they have you covered when it comes to all of your truly ticketing needs. And what separates them so much, in my humble opinion, is the fact that you have a ticketing app that not only has himself available for Mets tickets, concert show tickets, comedy show tickets, you name it. I utilize SeatGeek all the time and have well before they became a sponsor, which is why I'm so happy to be having them and pair with a promo code WARDY10 that you guys can utilize by clicking that link down below. But before we get there, let's talk about what separates SeatGeek from the rest here in the ticketing space. And truly what has really separated them has been, in my opinion, the opinions of many, which is why I've utilized their app for so long, is their grading scale and their color coordination system based on how good or how bad a bang for a buck are these tickets. So as you guys see for this past series against the Philadelphia Phillies, when we're looking at tickets here, you can see rating 1 through 10 and going from red to green. So if you get a ticket that's in the rating of 1 through 5 or so, more in the red, that is not a good bang for your buck, and you're probably spending way too much for what the ticket's actually worth. But if you go for a ticket that's in the green, north of 6, 7, 8, 9, certainly 10 rating, then you're getting an absolute fantastic bang for your buck, and you should hammer that should you guys have interest in acquiring Mets tickets or whatever you need on the ticketing front there in the SeatGeek app. So folks, make sure you head over, if you haven't already, to SeatGeek by clicking that link down in the description. It's hyperlinked, so if you have the app downloaded, it'll say right away WARDY10 promo code was added to your account, and you'll get 10% off your next ticketing purchase for whether it's Mets or whatever you have interest in. Again, in the ticketing space, make sure to check them out. Thank you guys so much for doing so, and once more, shout out to our friends at SeatGeek, as always, for being an amazing sponsor here on the platform. But hopping right into this, everybody, I want to start today's discussion by further venting and sharing the frustration from this, not only this past series loss, but the past 3 series for the Mets, right? The Mets haven't won a series in over 3 series now, which is not ideal. They split that series against the Nationals. They obviously didn't win their series against the Diamondbacks, and now they've lost their latest series here to the St. Louis Cardinals. And what is the commonality with all these previous losses for the Mets? 6 of their past 7 losses have been by, yes, 1 run. Out of the 13 games that the Mets have had themselves lose so far this year, 11 out of the 13, they've only lost by 2 or fewer runs. And when we get into the context of what has been the continued issue with each and every game for this Mets team, not only since the start of the season, but especially over their past 7 losses stretch, it's been the continued issue with runners in scoring position. Now, I've harped on this plenty on the platform in our post-game segments, as they did last night, so check that out in case you guys haven't already, as we broke down everything that transpired in Games 1 and Games 2, both very frustrating losses for the Mets there against the Cardinals. But outside of what is a boneheaded decision by Carlos Mendoza when it comes to the bullpen, when it comes to not utilizing Edwin Diaz enough from previous series, and then he finally comes in after he's been on rest for 8 days, and you bring him in a one-run ball game where the Mets are losing, and they lose in the end. That's frustrating. Then you add in all the defensive web gems where Juan Soto's getting robbed of home runs, Brandon Nimmo almost a 110-liner to right, Jordan Walker somehow makes a catch for Nolan Arenado tumbling over in foul territory, same thing with Lars Nootbaar. You add in that, then you add in a schmuck of an umpire that was absolutely horrendous in game 1 of the doubleheader, and honestly in game 2 wasn't all that much better. There were some egregious calls as well. There are a lot of things that didn't go in the Mets' favor. It was BABIP galore, but the one commonality with all these losses all season long is the Mets' lack of hitting when it matters most with runners in scoring position. That's why, as things currently stand for the Mets, they are a bottom feeder in all of the National League and hitting with runners in scoring position. And the crazy thing is that all it takes is a couple more hits for them to go to right around an average of around the Mendoza line to 250. All it takes is just a couple hits to get to league average with runner in scoring position, yet the Mets have faltered so much in these matchups. And listen up to the following statistics, everybody. At least start from that Minnesota Twins series loss there where you lost 4-3. It had a 3-for-12 running and scoring position situation for our New York Mets. Absolutely horrendous, and they left 9 on base. Then we get to the next loss for the Mets, 5-4 against the Nationals. They were 2-for-6 with runners in scoring position and left 5 on base. The 8-7 loss to the Nationals that we saw, which was just as frustrating in a walk-off fashion as the first loss in that 4-game set. 3-for-12 again with runners in scoring position and left 8 on base total. Then we get to the Arizona Diamondbacks series, leading into now the matchup we have beginning tonight. Their 4-3 loss against the Diamondbacks, 0-for-10 with the runners in scoring position and 13 left on base. Absolutely abysmal, and to do that at home especially is all the more frustrating. The 4-2 loss there to the Diamondbacks not long after, 0-for-2 with runners in scoring position, no offensive show, and they left a total of 7 on base. Then we get to this past Cardinals series, the past couple games for the Mets, 6-5 loss in game 1 of the doubleheader, 3-for-15 with runners in scoring position and left 12 on base. Then we get to the 5-4 Mets loss with runners in scoring position, 3-for-11 with runners in scoring position there, and 10 left on base. Needless to say that while we can nitpick a lot of these individual things from maybe not loving Carlos Mendoza's bullpen decisions, or you're not loving necessarily the configuration of the lineup where there's a lack of production, especially in the 4-6 hitters, and that's a big part of the problem here, everybody. Between Vientos, Nimmo, and at DH, the Mets are just not getting the consistent hitting nearly enough. The top of the order has been carrying themselves for the most part, even with Juan Soto trying to get more in the groove, and he has started to do that. He went 4-for-14 this past series against the Cardinals and was robbed of a 3-run home run that we all saw was clearly going to be a home run if it wasn't for Victor Scott upsetting us all on this past very gloomy Sunday. Not a happy Sunday for your guy Wardy. I'm sure it wasn't the case for each and every one of you guys either. But point is that when you look at the bottom of the Mets lineup, the top of the Mets lineup, they have been doing their thing for the most part, but it's not been the heart, the true meaty core, the 4-6 that the Mets need to get continued production from, because they're constantly in situations where they have 1, 2, if not bases loaded every single game on almost any by any basis, because the Mets put guys on base more than most in Major League Baseball. The Mets have been amongst the league's best this year at putting guys on base. They've been doing that at a great clip, but when it comes to the runners in scoring position, they're all looking like to a degree Pete Alonso last season, where Alonso just couldn't hit a lick with runners in scoring position. Now he can this year. Now he goes for opposite field. He's tremendous. Don't get me started on how amazing Pete has been this season, but this is a collective effort by this Mets team, and the only way that they're going to be able to get out of their hole, when, mind you, their schedule just gets unbelievably more difficult here as we enter the month of May and then certainly June, they need to come together as a group and clutch up in these high leverage situations. As this Mets team has been in it every single ball game with the exception of 2 losses this year, and there's only one loss that honestly stands out where they had nothing going, and that was Saturday game I was in attendance for when they lost 5-0 at home against the Marlins. Outside of that, every game has been either losing by 3 runs or less, and they've been in it every single time. Every game they either came back from a deficit and then lost by a run, or they had the lead then lost it, or they found themselves dominating the entire ball game, or they found themselves rallying all the way back. They make things interesting on an every night basis, but they just need to turn things on a little bit more and at least bat, 250 to 300 runners in scoring position every once in a while, versus having these 3-for-12 games. It just is not going to get the job done. And thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. That's just what I had to let out there regarding the Mets' continued issues right now, because again, we're going to continue to nitpick individual player performances. Mendoza's bonehead decisions at times, even though I will say that outside the bullpen, I really don't have much to gripe with Mendoza so far. But the bullpen is that same discussion as last year. Sometimes he just looks like he doesn't know what he's doing. Other times he looks absolutely brilliant. And this is why it's a results-oriented business, and how those pitchers fare goes in direct hand with how we react and overreact naturally as Mets fans. And speaking of overreaction, let's talk about how everything went wrong for the Mets in this past day's game on Sunday, the doubleheader. Because not only did the Mets drop both games by a run, but the Mets also had Jesse Winker in the outfield for the first time this season. And in the first game, potentially the only game now this year, that Jesse Winker has himself playing the corner outfield and left, he only had one ball that came in his region to make a throw, and that one throw he made, it has now sidelined him to inevitably be placed on at least the 10-day injured list as he's heading back to New York and not heading to Arizona per multiple reports, as he's going to get further imaging and MRI done. But as Jesse spoke to the media this past night and said it himself, he made a throw, felt a tweak in his right side, and now the Mets are fearful that he is an oblique injury, a strain of some sort. We have to hope that if it is an oblique strain, that's just grade 1, nothing too serious. Hopefully he'll be back in a couple of weeks, because obliques are very finicky, and you don't want to rush things as the Mets did with Sean Manaea and his injury, because that set him back. We've seen countless times in Mets past when it comes to guys with oblique injuries and how long they can take. Famously, Francisco Lindor in 2021 and that oblique injury that he had in this series against the Pirates in Pittsburgh. I remember that like it was yesterday, because Jacob deGrom was injured around that time too. It was a nail in the coffin for the Mets, as they were hoping to get some type of run going in 2021, but obviously that simply didn't happen. But fast forward to present day, Jesse Winker now looks like he's going to be sidelined the next couple weeks with an oblique issue, which I hate to see. Starling Marte is healthy. He did exit game 2 of the doubleheader prematurely in the outfield after he made a nice clutch opposite field hit to drive in a pair of runs with 2 outs. That was apparently part of Carlos Mendoza's pregame plan, given the fact that was his first game in outfield all season long. I personally didn't like that. I feel like that takes away the game feel when you need to score runs, and Marte actually clutched up and had some quality at-bats in that ball game, and you put the bat in the hands of Jose Alzcar. He does nothing the remainder of the ball game. The Mets lose by a run. Who knows? Maybe Marte would have been the difference maker again, considering he was the only guy that stood up offensively in game 2 of the doubleheader. But I digress. Enough of the Wardy tangents here. Let's now get on to talking about how the Mets are going to combat this Jesse Winker issue when looking at their lineup, and certainly maybe the outfield configuration. And here's the thing, everybody. Jesse Winker's not supposed to really play the outfield for the Mets this year. He's in a platoon DH spot with Starling Marte, mainly to face right-handed pitching. What does that mean? It means that how the Mets do this call-up is going to be far more indicative on what they just feel is best for the team, probably bat first, than anything else. And when we evaluate players that make most sense for this Mets team, potentially bat first, there are a couple that come to mind. Now, I know you might be wondering, okay, Wardy, why aren't we heavily emphasizing Brett Baty? Now, unless we are surprised, and later on this evening from the time of this video dropping, that Brett Baty gets a call, then okay. But given multiple reports, Brett Baty has now missed the past 4 games or so for AAA Syracuse, and he's been dealing with a sore big toe issue, which is kind of bizarre. Not really understanding how that happened. Maybe it was by a foul ball or something. Either way, Baty has missed the past couple games with an injury, and because he really hasn't been fresh, there's a lesser likelihood per Anthony Nicomo there on the beat for the Mets that he will actually get the call-up. So now we're thinking, what about Drew Gilbert? Why not give the kid a shot? 24 years of age already, on base at over a 400 clip right now, looking good in AAA Syracuse so far this year. Why not give him the call? I'm not saying that it's impossible to find out later today or in the coming days that Drew Gilbert gets a call-up, but what I will preface is the following. If you're the Mets, why would you call up Drew Gilbert unless you're going to guarantee him outfield playing time every single day? Because if you put him in the platoon DH role, it's only going to stunt him and potentially hurt things. And for the Mets, what do they need right now? It's not another outfield per se, because Jeff McNeil will be able to handle time in left field and center field at least fine. At least hopefully average at best, and that'll be enough to carry things for the Mets to really maximize their offensive output. Then you have Jose Alzcar, who's currently your 4th outfielder. That Alzcar's fine. He's been hitting. That we've seen him hit in plenty of games so far for the Mets, from spring training to the start of his debut this season. And defensively, he is far from a liability. He's fast and has a lot of speed on base pass too, as a guy that you can utilize as a pinch runner later in the ballgame should you wish. Tyrone Taylor is going to command the bulk of center field there when Alzcar isn't getting starts, and in right field it's going to be Juan Soto every single day. So in left field, it's going to be Brandon Nimmo, and then maybe a rotation again, as we mentioned, of McNeil in center/left. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with little to no outfield room right now. So barring changes, I do not expect Drew Gilbert to get the call, nor do I expect a guy in Celestino, who's looked good, that we've seen there in the minor leagues as well. Who I expect to hear later on this evening officially is going to be at least one of 2 players. And one guy that I think leads the way to a degree, given his offensive output, has to be the slugger that the Mets signed late heading into the minor league season, and that is John Singelton. Guys, let me put you on to John Singelton in case you guys don't know what a story he is. So Singelton was originally a top prospect back, we're going all the way back to 2015 or so, right? But he just doesn't pan out. You know, he bounces around multiple leagues throughout his career for the next north of a decade, and last season finds himself with a first base opportunity for the Houston Astros, with guys just simply not panning out there, especially famously Jose Abreu just kind of fell off a cliff not long after he landed there in Houston. And in the case of Singelton, he reached an opportunity to get consistent DH/first base reps for the majority of the season last year for the Astros, and he took advantage. He was above league average as a hitter, 105. We'll take that for what is a 234 average, a 321 on base, a 386 not OPS, but slug rather. 13 home runs for John Singelton. And it gets better from here, folks, because when we take a look at Singleton's splits against right-handed pitchers especially, Singelton had himself a 250 plus average and also had a north of an 800 OPS. So he did a lot of damage that we saw against right-handed pitching last year specifically, and knowing he'd be in a simple platoon with Marte makes endless sense to believe that he is a guy that can thrive here for the next north of 10 and 15 days at least there in that platoon DH role, a true power implementation, a guy who can take his walks as well, but actually drive baseballs out of the ballpark at a greater clip than a guy like Daniel Vogelbach. And to further expand on how well Singelton has been so far in the minor leagues that we've seen for AAA Syracuse this year, everybody, against right-handed pitching especially, in right around 69 ABs, he has 6 homers, 1 double, and he's been walked 22 times. So he's been getting on base at a great clip that we've seen against right-handed pitching. And speaking of Syracuse, look at the numbers down below. This was as of this past day or so, everybody. So if it's off by a game, no worries. 250 average, 411 on base, 512 slug, and I put 2 dots there by accident. 7 home runs, 18 RBIs, and well above league average is what we've seen so far for AAA Syracuse. This man has been on an absolute tear. He and Joey Meneses, the MLB vets especially, have been off to great starts this season, and Syracuse. And Singelton just has everything that I think the Mets would be immediately looking for. Now, the obvious downside is slower guy, DJ Stewart type build, not going to be stealing bags, not going to be overly versatile with the defense. He's a true platoon DH. But here's the thing. The Mets really don't need him to be anything else right now. And I don't see the Mets going out of their way to stunt the development of a Drew Gilbert type prospect unless Gilbert's going to be getting some fairly consistent reps in the outfield. And I just don't see how they're doing that right now. So all the more reason why a guy like John Singelton, I think, makes endless sense for this Mets team. And I would love to hear how you guys feel in the comments down below, because when looking at immediate MLB impact, no one has had greater previous reps than John Singelton. You know, he's definitely a better option than Billy McKinney. Because Billy McKinney, again, the Mets already have that kind of corner outfield type at Jose Alzcar. They don't need another guy that isn't known for the power much, just contactability, and just because he has major league experience, I'm not buying that. I think the Mets need to go out and call someone in the minor leagues that actually has power, especially from the left side, like what we saw there in Jesse Winker leading up to his injury, that can be the proper replacement, and John Singelton is right towards the tip of the top of the list to make that, in fact, a reality. But he's not the only lefty bat that stands out, everybody. Let's also talk about another guy that has been tearing the cover off the ball we've seen over the past couple weeks there for AAA Syracuse, and a guy that, you know, early that we saw in spring training, looks like he could potentially crack the team as a utility fit, but between injury and inconsistency in spring, it just didn't happen. Folks, let's break down what we could potentially have in Mr. Jared Young, because if you guys don't know the story on Jared Young, he's a fascinating one as well. Now, I actually remember doing a video on Jared Young when the Mets first signed him this past offseason, because I believe I did it while I was just roaming around Manhattan for the day there. I just went in a corner between 2 buildings and did a very suspect video on Jared Young signing with the Mets. And at the time, Jared Young was coming off of a very respectable campaign in 2024 where he can play all over the place. For one, like this season alone in Syracuse, he's played third, he's played first. I think he's had some outfield reps too, so he's really a versatile player, but mainly a backup first base option like Singelton outside DH than anything else. But this past season, he split time not only with AAA Cardinals affiliate, but also the Korean Baseball League. So in KBO, that he played around 38 games, he had, right around the same amount of home runs that he had there for AAA Cardinals last year. In 74 games, he had 285 average, a 411 on base, and a 506 slug. That's good for over 900 OPS, 11 home runs, 35 RBIs, and 41% better than the average batter in baseball in AAA for the Cardinals last year. Now, this season with the Syracuse Mets, a 302 average, a 474 on base, a 581 slug, 2 home runs, 11 RBIs, and 67% above league average as a batter. But between Jared Young having MLB experience. And even though he doesn't have a lot of it, his experience goes back to the 2023 season with the Chicago Cubs. He's a versatile player, a more versatile option than John Singelton. And that versatility might just be enough to kind of sway the Mets to favor him over a guy like Singelton. So that's why I wanted to discuss him as well. I firmly believe it's going to be one of these two players. And if it isn't, I apologize. But I'm pretty confident that's going to be one of these two guys from everything that we're hearing right now. So we will find out official word later on today, more than likely. But in the meantime, John Singelton, Jared Young, two guys that can provide power from the left side for this Mets team and a limited platoon role. And I got to be honest, I think that there's upside with Jared Young. I really do. I like his swing a lot. I like how he's went with his gap-to-gap ability that we've seen in Syracuse. And I like the fact that, again, he can field positions for you if you need him to. So not that he's going to be overly proficient in any area, but a guy that, again, if you need to go to in a pinch, and also need a guy that can at least be decent on the base pass. You know, last year that we saw for AAA Cardinals, he did have 6 stolen bags there over that period of time. So he can steal a bag or two, and it isn't as much of a slow poke around the bases as a guy in John Singelton. Not a slight on John, just a reality of the frame that he has as a player. And even here are some more Jared Young highlights, because I know you guys are probably tired of watching the same thing over and over again. I apologize, but I didn't want to show highlights from the past couple years or whatever when I know we have some solid stuff there from what he's done in Syracuse. And this is highlights of a 5 RBI day that Jared Young had back on April 27th. Like I said, he's just been off to a roaring hot start this year in Syracuse. He, Donovan Walton were fringe MLB players that, you know, we were expecting to see at some point this season should injuries arise, and now we've kind of found ourselves in that situation. But what the Mets need right now is not necessarily a for certain outfielder type, and while Brett Beatty does make a level of sense of batter from the left side, you have to wonder if they're going to be more cautious with calling up a guy like Brett right now because he's coming off of that toe injury and hasn't played the past number of days, paving the way for guys in Jared Young and John Singelton that have more of the MLB experience, more of the immediate power production as well, and guys that in limited platoons, especially against certain right-handed pitchers, I could just see raking. I really can. I don't think that they will come in and be a huge liability to the Mets lineup by any stretch. I think they'll just kind of continue to pass the baton the way that Jose Azcar has done his part for the most part, outside of like one bonehead defensive play from this past day or two. Outside of that, he's been fine. Jared Young, John Singelton, let me know, guys, between the two in the comments down below, which one is more appealing to you as a Mets fan and why? Is it the more versatile option, but maybe less power and less MLB product versus a guy like John Singelton that, again, is going to be pretty much boom or bust, but gets on base at a great clip, a lot of power, and had 13 home runs in over 100 games last year for the Major League Baseball Houston Astros. So it's not like he was in the minor leagues all last year. Far from it. But let me hear, guys, and thank you so much for doing exactly that. But now, as we get back into this one, let's talk further on this Mets team and talk about what is next for them. Because as we head into this Arizona Diamondbacks series, there are a lot of things that the Mets can take advantage of, but keyword can. Doesn't mean that they will. And that's why we need to have this discussion and see what they can do here in this 3-game set beginning tonight. And it's going to be a late night here on the WardyNYM platform. We may have pregame coverage for you, but we most certainly will have postgame coverage for you after a late night of Mets baseball. The only way that we don't do a postgame is if the game's really, really bad and there's nothing to say. And I'm better off just recapping it in my big Mets updates video that drops the following morning. If then, so be it. But hopefully we have a big game to break down at north of 1 a.m. or whenever it's going to be later on today. Technically, that many of you guys are watching this. But game 1, everybody, we're going to have Ryan Nelson there on the bump for the Arizona Diamondbacks with a just under 6 ERA, facing off against Griffin Canning at his 2.61 ERA. Obviously, a favorable matchup here for the Mets on the pitching end, and it would be great to see Griffin Canning give some length for this Mets team, as Tyler McGill obviously didn't have his sharpest outing for the Mets this past night, nor did Blake Tidwell do us any favors on the bullpen end, which was an unfortunate reality by calling up a kid that just wasn't ready for the major leagues yet. It was still cool to see him pump 98 gas. Awesome to see, but he's got a lot more work to do. So pitching game 1, matchup-wise on paper, loving that for the Mets, and I'm also loving the fact that the Arizona Diamondbacks, after having a sizable lead in their series finale in Philadelphia against the Phillies this past day, were blowing it, and it led them to still winning 11-9, but they absolutely taxed their bullpen even further when that's been a big bugaboo for them so far this season. Game 2 in this matchup, everybody, it was initially supposed to be Corbin Burnes in this series, but Burnes is out now with injury with shoulder inflammation, so instead, it's Zach Gallen, who had a very sharp start against the Mets just this past week, facing off against the southpaw David Pearson. Gallen with a sub-5 ERA, and Pearson with a 3.06 ERA across his number of starts this season. And getting onto the series series finale, a 340 Eastern game. We have Kodai Senga, our ace, towing the rubber with his 1.38 ERA against Mr. Merrill Kelly, a workhorse, one of the most underrated veteran right-handers in Major League Baseball. Since Kelly came back to the major leagues from overseas, what was like 4 seasons ago now, he's been absolutely reliable. Like, honestly, Merrill Kelly is a guy that you wouldn't think would be as good as he is, but every single season, Merrill Kelly's solid. Like last year, 4 ERA in 13 starts. Year before that, 3.29. ERA in 30 starts. Year before that, 3.37. Year before that, 4.44. Year before that, we saw 2.59. 2019, 4.42. There's been plenty to like with Merrill Kelly. He's just an innings eater that can go out and give you 5 to 7 strong innings, snap of a finger without a problem. So hopefully the Mets can, again, beat up on this Diamondbacks team that, while, of course, he won this past year against the Phillies, they're taxing the pitching front. They're taxing the bullpen front. The Mets need to pounce, because the same way that the Mets had inexcusable losses against the Cardinals and the Nationals is the same exact way they had inexcusable losses against the Diamondbacks. How do you go 0-10 with runners in scoring position at home, leave 13 on base? Like, how do you do that with the red-hot start the Mets have had at home as well? This is a problem that the Mets need to correct as soon as humanly possible. No better way to start than beginning tonight here, Game 1 against those same Snakes. Got to take advantage of the opportunities given to you. And these games against the Diamondbacks are mightily important, because the Diamondbacks and Mets, what do they have in common? They're heavily pushing for playoffs this year, right? So you remember how the Diamondbacks were boxed out of playoffs last year because of the Braves and the Mets splitting their doubleheader in that extra day of the season? Well, that can happen again, but it could hurt the Mets or other teams, obviously, depending on the configuration. So these battles against not just any NL team, but NL teams that you know are either going to win their division or push hard for a wild card spot. We all know the Diamondbacks are more than likely not winning the division this year, but it doesn't mean that they can't crack a wild card spot with the 3 opportunities there. So for the Mets, they need to try to take this series against the Diamondbacks. The way that the D-backs stole one from us at home is the same way that we now need to steal it from them, this time in their ballpark. Now, to wrap up the show, everybody, let's give you guys a quick breakdown of what's happening in the farm from Port St. Lucie all the way up there to AAA Syracuse, folks, because there is a lot going on that I'm excited to share with each and every one of you. Because it starts here, everybody. You know what? We might as well begin with Port St. Lucie. I'm just going to get into it in just a second, because, of course, as I'm doing this, my computer decides, you know what? We're just going to take forever to load. And if it takes forever to the point where it's like we have ourselves a problem, then I may need to defer to Plan B live while we're doing this recording. And what that will actually not need to be is that, because everything's popped up now. We're good. Let's talk about the Port St. Lucie Mets. They lost their latest game this past day on May 4th. May the 4th be with you all. I know that I'm a day late saying that. Whoop-de-doo. Hammerheads won 4-2 over the Port St. Lucie Mets. And offensively, the standouts were not a whole lot. You know, unfortunately, Colin Houck, who, again, first-round pick from a couple years ago under Billy Epler, 204 average, 686 OPS. 0 for 4, but did have himself an RBI. I believe that would be a sac fly. Doing a little bit better than the Mets in regards to scoring position, still 2 for 8. I'll take that. It's better than nothing. But there's really nothing else to break down this one. They just did not have any offense going for the most part. So now, let's get on to the Brooklyn Cyclones. As the Cyclones won their baseball game 7-1, they're now 17-9 on the season. Brooklyn's off to a roaring hot start there. And the key standouts on the offensive end were Jacob Reimer, who had himself a 3-home run game this past week. He plays DH, he plays third base, he plays all over the infield. Reimer had himself his 10th double this season, a 2-for-4 game with an RBI, now batting .327 with over 1,000 OPS. Marco Vargas, who was called up this past week from St. Lucie finally to the Brooklyn Cyclones, 1-for-4 with a run scored. Eli Serrano, 0-for and leadoff. Boston Barrel, 0-for, which pains me because I like Barrel a lot. Want to see him pick it up. Suero at first base, 1-for-3 with a run scored and an RBI. That's notable. 243 average, 941 OPS. He's had a lot of power this year. And De Los Santos in left field, 2-for-4, including a home run by De Los Santos, his second of the season. 4 RBI day, still batting under the Mendoza line, but over 700 OPS. Funny stats there. On the pitching end, we saw Mr. Hall, Nolan Hall, who the Mets drafted in the 7th round, or pardon me, Noah Hall, not Nolan, I apologize. Originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, was drafted by the Mets in 2023 in the 7th round. One of the final picks by Big Bucks Billy Epler. And Hall went 5 shutty in this one. 2 hits, no earned runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. Has a 1.88 ERA so far this season. not too bad, if you ask me. So definitely another arm to keep an eye out for more on this season. But let's get on to the Rumble Ponies, because they had a doubleheader this past day, and like the Mets, they didn't fare too great, but they did at least fare better in one game over the other. They won one and lost one, so that's still better than the Mets, right? Well, let's talk about the game they lost. It was 1-0 to the Seawolves, and unfortunately, they wasted a solid pitching performance by Jonathan, as he did only go 4 innings, but he was fantastic in those 4 innings. The count was up, 86 pitches, 4 hits allowed, 1 earned run, 3 walks, 8 strikeouts, now down to a 3.38 ERA on the season. Jonathan is one of the more heralded prospects for the Mets on the pitching end, and it won't be long before he moves up eventually to AAA Syracuse. Orlana, who continues to dominate as relief option, who I know my guy Isaac, our pitching contributor on the platform, loves, won another 2 scoreless innings so far, and now has a .73 ERA in relief. That's another guy that I won't be shocked if David Stearns like, oh yeah, buddy, you're going up to Syracuse. Won't be long before you get the call, because I love how David Stearns is aggressive with the guys on the farm, actually taking notice to guys properly developing, and is aggressive because, again, at the end of the day, these guys are going to be here at the bigs. As long as we're not hurrying their development with the aggressive call-ups, that's all that matters. So, loving what I'm seeing on the pitching end, offensively, not so much there. Let's get into the other game, 6-4 Rumble Ponies victory this time. And the standouts on the offensive end are as follows. We saw Lugo there at third base have a 3-for-4 game, including his third double and his first home run of the season. 324 average, 755 OPS. We also saw some key offensive production from Hernandez at second base, 2 RBIs, batting well below the Mendoza line right now. Nick Morabito, 1 for 3 with a run scored, 227, 679 OPS. Ryan Clifford, 1 for 3 with an RBI and a walk, still batting below the Mendoza line, and now below the 700 OPS. We got to get Clifford to pick it up big time. And that's pretty much it. Outside Wyatt Young looking great, batting ninth there, 2 for 3 with 2 runs scored, 250 average, just under 800 OPS. Wyatt Young was a great plate setter last year that we saw, and I expect to continue to see good things out of him in the minor leagues this season. Pitching wise, it was a bullpen game there for the boys, and the key stand on the bullpen was Mr. Ryan Lambert. He went 2 shutty, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, has yet to allow earned runs since being called up from the Cyclones now to the Rumble Ponies, and Lambert consistently pumps north of 100 on the gun. Absolute flamethrower. Very exciting prospect. Now let's get on to the Syracuse Mets. They lost their past night's game 4-2 there, and the standouts offensively were Donovan Walton hitting his 4th home run of the year, Billy McKinney hitting his 3rd of the year, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Walton 2 for 4, 259 average, 752 OPS. Singelton did play, so his numbers did drop ever so slightly. Still at a 923 OPS though, which we love. Joey Meneses didn't have a hit, which is surprising. Yeah, really not a lot of offense in this one at all. Drew Gilbert had a hit, which was a nice 273 average, 823 OPS there for Drew. Kevin Herget got the start there. Herget, who pitched for the Mets this past week, did allow an earned run there in 2 innings. He's a relief option, obviously, 3.86 ERA in the minors. Sean Reed Foley, after getting absolutely torched his last outing, bounced back 1 here. 1 scoreless inning, still had a 9 flat ERA. Rico Garcia, who I like a lot, and I think the Mets will consider for the bullpen sometime this year, went 2 shutty, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, 5.4 ERA. Anthony Gose, of course, Anthony Gose, a southpaw option the Mets may consider in the near future, with Danny Young and A.J. Minter not coming back anytime soon, as Danny is officially out for the year with Tommy John, and we're going to probably find out a similar fate for A.J. Minter with his lat strain, which pains me to say. But Anthony Gose, who is sitting right around a 2 ERA, now has a 4 ERA because he gave up 3 earned runs. No walks, no strikeouts, just 3 hits, 3 earned runs there in the loss. Ty Akak, 1.2 shutty, where he belongs in the minor leagues, and Chris Stavensky, 1.1 shutty. They've both been great in Syracuse so far this year. But folks, that is going to do it for our latest Mets Farm Report and our latest Big Mets Update segment in general. I hope you guys find yourself enjoying the content for breaking down what are the problems for the Mets so far, the cons, and what they need to do to remedy them on the runner and scoring position front, to everything else that we broke down. John Singelton, Jared Young, who's coming in for Jesse Winker, how are we going to fare against the Diamondbacks in that series preview there, as well as our pitching prospects and all overall prospects in our farm report. Thank you so much again for watching. Break it all down in the comments down below. What stood out the most to you and why. And I'll see you all in the next form of content later on today, like we always do here on the WardyNYM platform. Thanks again. As always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out, folks.